Are you ready to get fired up about Power Up Radio with Dr. Pat? This new show is unleashed, unshaken, unstoppable, as Dr. Pat brings mind-blowing news conversations with top world thought leaders unleashed like never heard before. Conversations covering leading-edge and headline-worthy topics from pop culture to presidents, sex to spirituality, surviving to thriving. Dr. Pat is powered up and you don't want to miss it. Think authentic and spontaneous, fun no matter what. Power Up Radio starts now.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of Power Up with me, Dr. Pat. And by the way, we're going to talk about something really cool, a second chance at life. Cryonics and Walt Disney. We're going to talk about this. Jamie's going to be joining me here today as well. Hey, Jamie, what do you think about this topic?
I think it's really interesting, and I'm excited to talk about it.
All right, cool. I mean, tell me a little bit about what the interest is. You know, I know for me, I was totally fascinated by it for a really long time. And even before we were talking about it in the context of today, but the whole idea of putting people in suspension, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the movies we've seen decades ago where people were traveling to another planet, like, okay, even aliens, right? They just locked them in a tube and there they were. What's the interest for you?
Just the whole concept, like the people that think it's real and would do that to themselves versus like pseudoscience.
Exactly. You know, so from a couple of different perspectives about it, you know, what we're talking about here is not just about the physical state of it, but we're also talking emotionally about what does this mean for people and how does it work? And so, you know, it's important to really take a look at, if we could, you know, this idea of what cryonics is and or what people might look at when they think about cryogenics. And so this is for all practical purposes and for today's show, you know, the question really is, what is it that so draws us to this place where we think that holding on and stepping into the world of cryogenics is the way to go? And so Walt Disney comes to the forefront. So much has been written about Walt Disney, and so much has been written about, you know, is Walt Disney's body frozen? Is that really the deal? Is that what he did? And so there's a lot of information about this, including his death, complications from lung cancer, for which he had undergone surgery for a month. I think it was a month earlier he did that. And his body was cremated on December 17th. And, you know, a big event around this. And Walt Disney, of course, you know, we know about Disney, but Walt Disney and his journey and his legend and all of that, of course, you can find out about that. But there's this rumor, some people call it absurd, the secrecy around Walt Disney's death and burial. And, you know, so the question is, what happened to him? Why do people believe that this is what he did, that he literally has put his body in a cryogenically frozen state? A lot of conversations, but it really brings to the forefront, you know, questions about what is this? You know, what is cryonics? What is it about that we are so fascinated by? So part of this actually an institute. You know, it's a foundation and it's a nonprofit, and it's Cryonics Institute. And they are people that, let me just tell you what they say. Welcome to your future, Cryonics Institute Technology Extending Life. And when you think of this, they talk about, just right from their site, you know, CI, Cryonics Institute, Technology for Life, has performed more whole body cryonic suspensions than any other cryonic organization. I'm like, wow, who do they, who, where are these people? What is it? Some people look at this from a very, let's just call it ethical perspective. And they ask the question about, is that what we should be doing? Then there's also the question about, is that what we should be doing if we are religious? So, what is cryonics? Cryonics is a technique that is intended to hopefully save lives and greatly extend lifespan. It involves cooling legally dead people, liquid nitrogen, um, so that physical decay essentially stops, in the hope that future scientific procedures will someday revive them and restore them to youth and good health. That's kind of the background of it. A person is held such a state to be cryopreserved, so to speak. It's a you become a cryopreserved patient. Um, and because they don't regard cryopreserved people as being inevitably dead. Isn't this interesting? So it's a technique to save lives, but it involves cooling legally dead people, but they call it cryopreserved because you're really not dead. So I love when they go through and they answer the questions. And so the question mark here, and this is the point I think of this conversation. What if you're not legally dead? What if you're not legally dead? What if you're not that person that makes the list? So legally here, at least in the United States, I'm not sure what's going on around the world. Maybe Jamie can help me with this, but legally, not yet. You can't do it. You can't like take a person or child or somebody that is terminally ill or sufferingly ill. And those are a couple different things. Terminally ill, you can't take a person and hope that one day it'll be under controlled conditions, be able to be brought back. And so here's really where this gray area is. And boy, think about this for yourself if you want. You can't do it legally, but they hope, and that CI hopes, that someday it will be under carefully controlled conditions for terminally ill patients. And, it says this is not critical to the concept of cryonics. Their claim it's not critical to that. And basically, the controversy around this is really interesting. At a legal death, most of the person's tissues are still alive. So when you legally die, yeah, but most of your tissues are still alive. Thousands of people have been revived after they have stopped breathing or have their heart stopped. So this is what the Institute is saying. It's a lot of information on their website, cryonics.org. Go over there and help. They are a nonprofit. And by the way, because we're a nonprofit, they really have to follow all the legal rules. So legal death is a point at which, under current state of medical science, the doctor basically says, I give up. I can't do anymore. But there are just as many people living today that have been revived after what would have been considered an irreversible death, even at 50 years old. So the doctors of the future may not give up so quickly. Cryonics attempts to transport our patients preserved at or near the instant of a legal death to those doctors for treatment. Wow. Welcome to the future, which is here now. Jamie, what do you think about this particular aspect of cryonics? Here, you cannot legally have a person that may be totally suffering. You cannot put them in a cryonic state because they're not legally dead. What do you think about that? Should people have the opportunity to freeze themselves, so to speak? What do you think about that, Jamie?
I mean, if you're sick and dying and have no cure and you're gonna die anyways, you may as well just freeze yourself and have a potential life in the future.
And it's interesting too. If you go and you take a look at this even further, but what is the thing that makes this even a thing? I don't think if it wasn't for the conversation about Walt Disney, maybe that wouldn't have been a thing, because Disney certainly had the finances to do something like this. And he certainly died at what some people call really young age, right? Longtime smoker, lung cancer, died, at age 65. And so it seems like, wow, you know, did he do this? And what was their capability in 1966? I think that's a big question for me. We're talking about cryonics now, we're talking about the Institute, and they are not associated, as far as I know, with anything we're talking about with Walt Disney. You can go look at Walt Disney. I mean, I think PBS even did a special on how strange it was. What do you think, Jamie? Is Walt Disney frozen?
I have no idea. His daughter claims that he was not and that he's cremated, but obviously they're not going to tell us, and he'd be like the one person in history we'd want, like, miraculously to come back to life. So if they did, they're definitely not ever going to tell us until he actually comes back or does not.
Yeah. And then can you imagine now if we take this one step further, right? Let's think about this from the way that we define life, at least in the United States of America. So when somebody is legally gone, legally dead, everything that happens with their estate, everything that happens with everything. And it's really fascinating to really look at what the complications are. But more importantly, what is the impact of this? If truly people, and I will tell you that the organizations that are practicing this, they don't claim to have a way, to far as I can tell, they don't claim to have a way, um, to bring somebody back, to revive somebody. And so this is really fascinating. The question is, has any mammal been cryopreserved and revived? Right, Jamie? That's a question. Has any mammal? And so the information is not to cryogenic temperatures. Dogs and monkeys have had their blood replaced in protected solution and cooled to below 0 degrees Celsius. And they have been subsequently rewarmed and revived. So I want to say it again. Somebody's doing this experiment. PETA, if PETA knew about this, I think if PETA knows about this, they go out of their minds. Dogs and monkeys have had their blood replaced. I'm going to say it again. And protective solution cooled below 0 degrees Celsius with subsequent rewarming and revival. This is fascinating. Nematode worms have been cryopreserved in liquid nitrogen minus 196 degrees Celsius and subsequently revived. That's like a worm. And then in July of 2005, where and this is a society, you guys can go and look at the Society for Cryobiology conference. It was announced at that conference that a rabbit kidney had been completely vitrified to a solid state at minus 130 degrees Celsius, rewarmed and transplanted into a rabbit with a complete viability. I got to slow down and say that because now we're looking at these movies that come out where it's a future movie. I can't remember the movie. It's either called Repro Man or something. I don't remember the name of it. Where you literally grab somebody's organ and revive it or hold it and replace it. So this is fascinating. 2005 Society for Cryobiological Conference announced that a rabbit kidney, little baby kidney, had been completely vitrified to a solid state of minus 135 degrees Celsius, then rewarmed, then transplanted to another rabbit who probably needed the new kidney with complete viability. So here's the caveat. A whole mammal has not yet been cryopreserved to cryogenic temperatures and revived. Science is moving in that direction. Whoa. Wow. Science is moving into that direction. But this is really the science of this. I'm going to talk about what people see as ethically and morally the thing. The success of cryonics, it doesn't depend on the state of the current cryopreservation technology. So this is what they believe. So we can have sort of almost archaic cryonic or cryopreserved technology. So let's say Walt Disney in '66 somehow got this technology that was like ancient, right? Like who knows? '66 sounds like so many years ago. I know how old I was in '66, but if you go back, so they're saying if that was done then, even with the most primitive of cryopreservation technology, right? They go on to say, we believe that the damage caused by current cryopreservation is limited and can someday be repaired in the future. Molecular repair technologies, like my favorite new technology right now, nanotechnology, will provide techniques in the future that are not available today. This is the fascinating world of cryonic suspension. And what's fascinating about it is underneath all this is the brilliance of nanotechnology. So nanotechnology, if you heard me do a show on Lime Talk Radio, and I did that show on nanotechnology, and I shared a story about a young girl who happened to get an internship in a science lab who was formulating nanotechnology and its ability to take nanotechnology, set a computerized frequency to it, identify a frequency of something in the body that needed to get zapped out. And that's what you do. You put these nanodes in the body and they go zapping around and they go zapping at the thing that you want to kill. And this young woman, this is a great story. Young woman was on this internship, had not been accepted into college, but her mom suffered dearly from Lyme disease. And YouTube, I just want to give you a heads up, Lyme disease is real. Chronic Lyme disease is real. There are 360, and they're not counting them all, cases every year of people with Lyme disease. That's an epidemic. 360,000 cases, that's an epidemic. So this young woman had time and said, can I use the lab? And what did she do? She looked in a way to look at her mom's blood. And I'm going to give you the non-technical version here, but you could look it up on your own. And she used nanotechnology to be able to, let's just call it, program the nanos so that they knew the frequency of, let's just say, Borrelia. And so here she was experimentally with blood. She didn't experiment on them, experimentally with blood, and saw that she could literally program this nano zap, 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 zap. What? So when they talk about nanotechnology and cryopreservation technology, what we're saying is this is the future. Here, let's jump to, now that we've talked about this, maybe nanotechnology will work. I do believe nanotechnology is going to be molecular repair technologies of the future. I mean, clearly every science fiction movie that's coming out now shows about nanotechnology. The whole idea about nanotechnology was, in our pop culture, was elevated by that movie that Vin Diesel was in, where they literally created these nanodes in his body to really repair everything. Kind of really way out there. But is it? Is it out there? Here's the question. Is cryonics a wild science fiction gamble? That's the question. Because if you believe that cryonics is a wild science fiction gamble, then where you sit is you sit in the place of not believing in this particular science to do anything at all. Well, when you read the article from cryonics.org, what you're going to find is in reading it is they don't believe that. And they are not alone. There are many, many people. And I got to tell you, there are science laboratories around the world with this. Cryonics is based on the evidence of emerging technologies that are in development today, according to cryonics.org. This includes nanotechnology, the manipulation of individual atoms or molecules. And they believe that this will eventually allow mankind to rebuild or repair virtually every physical object, including human cells and biological tissue. So here's a question that I always pondered. If nanotechnology, and by the way, I'm going to give you a term, nanomedicine. So here we go. When will it happen? What? If nanotechnology is so like cool, and this young woman I talked about, by the way, did get a scholarship. This thing that she did with the blood and killing the lion, Borrelia, I mean, breakthrough stuff. God accept. Here's a question. When will it happen? According to Robert A. Freitas, author of 3-volume text, Nanomedicine, a great read, selections from which are available, and you can go to cryonics.org and get the links. He has publicly stated, I would not be surprised. I think he's wrong, but this is him though. I would not be surprised if the first cryonic revival was attempted by 2040 or 2050. Of course, no one can reliably predict such dates, and we don't rely on any particular prediction. I think not. I think that once the world of nanomedicine is pulled away, and I hope that one of the pharmaceutical companies actually see the power in this, because without their support, the case for medicine, pharmaceuticals over nanomedicine is going to be a giant battle. One will get funding and one will not. So why, if nanomedicine, and why if, Freitas is so clear about nanomedicine, why isn't every dollar that investors have plugged into it? Isn't that really the question? Aren't we really looking at an ethical and moral question? Are we so close to holding on to our pharmaceutical industry and the way of healing that we become in conflict with nanomedicine? But cryonics is dependent upon nanomedicine, or isn't it? Here's the thing. Dr. Ralph Merkel, in his essay, The Molecular Repair of the Brain, because let's not forget the brain. I mean, I'm sitting here with 2 bionic knees, so we know that can be done. But let's talk about what's up here, folks. This is the question. This is what he observes. He said, interesting, and somewhat to the author's surprise, there are no published technical articles on cryonics that claim it won't work. Okay, I got to say it again. Merkel, in his essay, The Molecular Repair of the Brain. Please read this thing. Interestingly and really surprisingly, there are no published technical articles on cryonics that claim it won't work. And he goes on to say, a literature search on cryonics, along with personal inquiries, has not produced a single technical paper on the subject that claims that cryonics is not feasible. On the other hand, technical papers and analysis on cryonics that speak favorably of its eventual success have been published. It is unreasonable, given the extant literature, to conclude that cryonics is unlikely to work. So if this is true, and there's a notable technology paper, it's in the Annals of the New York Academy of Science, it's a real paper, it's about rejuvenation research. If this is true, what the heck are we waiting for? Would you like to be frozen? If you had the choice today, so I'm going to leave y'all with, if you had the choice today, say you have a healthy body, I don't know, would you get frozen? If there were no legal constraints and somehow the government says, you know what, it's your body, which the government doesn't say, it's your body. If you want to get frozen, you want to get over here and get yourself frozen, just go do it. Go ahead, freeze. Would you do it today? Would you want to see the future? This is really the psychotechnical, what I call psychotechnical aspect, which I love to do psychology and technology together. That is such a field that I love. I'm going to be talking about it later in the show. Today, the psychic and the doc. I love talking about psychotechnical areas of research or non-research. But in the end, if somebody walked up to you and said, it's not going to cost you a dime, I can freeze your body today, would you? Or would you think, can you freeze my family? Or would you think, my life is really good now? Or would you think, nothing at all, and in a nanosecond think, I can jump ahead maybe 100 years, maybe not, I don't know. But maybe I could jump ahead 20 or 30, I don't know. Am I going to go to a Terminator future? Wow, is that going to be the future? Can I jump ahead? Should we freeze maybe from a, I don't know, a research point of view? Should we go around and look at people and say, man, we need to freeze you right now because we need you in the future? So many ethical questions. I call it the psychology technology paradigm. That's our show for today. Many questions. The science is here, probably too expensive. And let's look at nanomedicine. All right, short break, everybody, on TTR. Lots more coming up. This is our Power Up Thought Show of the week. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Are you fired up? Thank you for listening to Power Up Radio with Dr. Pat Baccili, Unleashed, Unshaken, Unstoppable. If you missed any part of this show, subscribe to the podcast on the drpatshow.com or search Power Up Radio on any of your favorite podcast platforms.